There are moments when a single revelation can change everything we thought we knew about music legends. That is what happened when Elvis Costello, now 70 years old, finally spoke openly about Agnetha Faltskog. His words were not just casual remarks. They carried the weight of secrets guarded for nearly 4 decades. Behind the polished smiles of ABBA and the sharp wit of Costello lay a hidden connection that the world had never fully understood. What he revealed was not gossip, but a truth that unsettled fans, challenged long-held beliefs, and forced people to look again at the fragile humanity behind two of the most celebrated figures in pop history. The night of the revelation. In April 2025, during a live television broadcast in London, Elvis Costello stunned viewers by bringing up the name of Agnetha Faltskog. He spoke with an unusual mix of respect and regret, his voice heavy with the memory of something he had carried for almost 40 years. Costello explained that when he was young, his mother admired Agnetha deeply, and over time he too developed a fascination with her. But what made the moment explosive was not simply his confession of admiration. It was the story that followed. He recalled how, in 1985, at a time when ABBA had disbanded and Agnetha was struggling to rebuild her life after her divorce from Björn Ulvaeus, he sent her a song through her producer. Costello had quietly hoped for a collaboration, believing that her golden voice could transform his composition into something unforgettable. Yet the answer that came back was rejection. Agnetha declined, and Costello never spoke of it again, until now. For decades, he buried the disappointment, allowing it to shape his music silently. That night on live television, he admitted that the rejection stayed with him not just as a professional setback but as a personal wound. What shocked the audience most was the way he described Agnetha. He did not paint her as cold or arrogant, but as fragile, exhausted, and deeply human. He spoke of a woman overwhelmed by fame, haunted by loneliness, and unwilling to take on any more demands from the outside world. His revelation tore away the glittering image of the ice goddess and revealed instead a woman trying to survive her own success. Two legends, two worlds. To understand the weight of Elvis Costello's revelation, we need to go back to the late 1970s and early 1980s, when both he and Agnetha Faltskog stood at the height of their fame. Though they never appeared together in public, their careers unfolded like parallel lines, close enough for comparisons, yet worlds apart in tone and style. For Agnetha, the golden years of ABBA defined her existence. Alongside Björn Ulvaeus, Benny Andersson, and Anni-Frid Lyngstad, she helped create a string of international hits that topped charts and filled stadiums. Her image became iconic, the cool, blonde voice of an entire generation, a figure that European media nicknamed the Mysterious Muse. Yet behind the shimmering facade of songs like Dancing Queen and The Winner Takes It All was a woman carrying the private burden of a collapsing marriage. In 1980, her divorce from Björn was finalized, and while the band continued, the tension behind the scenes was undeniable. Night after night, she was expected to sing about heartbreak, often standing only a few feet from the man who had broken her heart. On the other side of Europe, Elvis Costello was becoming a phenomenon of a very different kind. Born in London in 1954, he rose from the energy of punk and new wave, wielding sharp lyrics and an even sharper tongue. By the early 1980s, he was being hailed as one of the most brilliant songwriters of his generation. His music was biting, political, ironic, yet also capable of deep tenderness. Rolling Stone placed him among the greats, while the New York Times called him the most brilliant creative artist of his generation. In public, the two seemed like opposites: Agnetha, polished and glamorous, and Costello, rebellious and uncompromising. Yet Costello often confessed admiration for her, describing her voice as golden and her presence as quietly magnetic. These comments fueled whispers in the European press that some invisible thread connected the two artists. Even if they never shared the same stage, the fascination was clear. For fans, it raised a tantalizing question. What might have happened if their paths had crossed not only in admiration, but also in collaboration? The Rejected Song. By 1985, the glitter of ABBA had dimmed, and Agnetha Faltskog was retreating from the endless demands of stardom. She was a mother first, still reeling from her divorce and battling exhaustion that had followed years under the spotlight. At the same time, Elvis Costello was in the midst of his most experimental period, searching for new directions after the sharp-edged successes of his earlier albums. It was during this fragile moment that Costello made his move. Through producer Eric Stewart, Costello sent Agnetha a song. The title was never made public, though insiders later speculated that it might have been connected to the material that evolved into The Comedians, a track heavy with introspection and heartbreak. Costello's intention was simple, but ambitious, to fuse his lyrical intensity with Agnetha's hauntingly pure voice. He believed that her ability to convey fragility and strength could transform the song into something unforgettable. But the timing could not have been worse. Agnetha, still haunted by the collapse of her marriage, was emotionally fragile and wary of new commitments. She had also grown increasingly anxious about fame, stalked by tabloids and overwhelmed by her own fears of public life. Stewart later recalled that she seemed unable to shoulder another project, no matter how tempting. Quietly, she declined the offer. For Costello, the rejection was more than a professional disappointment. In later interviews, he admitted that the refusal stayed with him, not because Agnetha had dismissed his work, but because of what it revealed. He saw in her decision a woman who was not cold or arrogant, but deeply wounded, choosing survival over ambition. The unspoken message was clear. She could not risk losing more of herself. That hidden episode became one of the buried intersections between their lives, unknown to fans for nearly 40 years. Costello transformed his sense of rejection into music, pouring regret and longing into his 1986 album Blood and Chocolate, where themes of heartbreak and private struggle echoed through every track. For Agnetha, the moment was one more step in her withdrawal from the world stage. For both, it marked a silent turning point that would remain in the shadows, until Costello finally spoke of it in 2025, the shadows behind the spotlight. The mid-1980s were not simply a quiet pause for Agnetha Faltskog. They became the years when her carefully managed image as the radiant star of ABBA began to crack under the weight of reality. Fame had brought her glory, but it had also stolen her privacy, her peace of mind, and at times, even her sense of safety. After ABBA's unofficial split in 1982, Agnetha attempted to carve out a solo career. She released albums that showcased her voice, but each project seemed to drain her rather than inspire her. She was often described by colleagues as controlling in the studio, terrified of losing her grip on the one area of life she could still manage. Rumors spread of tense recording sessions and abrupt cancellations, feeding the perception that she was difficult. In truth, she was battling fears that few outsiders understood. The most devastating blows, however, came from her personal life. Her mother's tragic death in 1994 left her emotionally scarred, deepening the depression that had already shadowed her for years. Even before that, she had endured betrayal at the hands of those she trusted. A short romance with Detective Torbjorn Brander ended in humiliation when intimate details were sold to the tabloids. What should have been private became public spectacle, reinforcing her decision to guard her heart and retreat further into isolation. Then came the darkest chapter, the stalking ordeal that haunted her through the late 1990s. A Dutch fan named Gert van der Graaf moved close to her home, sending letters, appearing outside her property, and even peering through her windows. Though restraining orders were issued, he returned again and again. For Agnetha, her countryside estate in Eckerö, once a sanctuary, turned into a prison. Friends recalled her sleeping with the lights on, checking locks repeatedly, consumed by fear. These experiences reshaped her completely. No longer the smiling blonde icon, she became a recluse, a figure of mystery who rarely appeared in public and avoided major collaborations. The world saw her absence as arrogance, but those close to her knew it was survival. She had chosen to protect what little peace she could still claim, even if it meant living in solitude. Costello's silent transformation. While Agnetha Faltskog withdrew into silence, Elvis Costello moved forward in his own restless way. Yet even as he reinvented himself musically, the shadow of that unspoken rejection lingered. For him, the mid-1980s were a period of upheaval, marked by personal heartbreak and professional experimentation. In 1986, he released Blood and Chocolate, an album steeped in raw emotion. Listeners heard biting lines, themes of betrayal, and lyrics soaked with longing. Costello never directly tied these songs to his unfulfilled collaboration with Agnetha, but years later, in interviews, he admitted that hidden disappointments and the cruelty of youth had left their marks. The unrecorded song became part of a larger narrative, music as a way of wrestling with regret. His personal life was equally turbulent. His first marriage to Mary Burgoyne had ended, and he later entered a relationship with Kate O'Riordan before eventually finding stability with jazz pianist Diana Krall in the early 2000s. Each phase of his life fueled new creative energy. He seemed determined to turn every wound into a melody, every loss into a new voice. Where Agnetha chose retreat, Elvis chose reinvention. Yet despite the differences in their paths, Agnetha was never far from his mind. Costello frequently praised her in interviews, describing her as one of the rare singers who could channel fragility into something powerful. Observers began to notice subtle influences of ABBA's melodic structures in his own work. Oliver's Army, one of his most famous songs, bore harmonies that critics later traced back to ABBA's sound. It was a reminder that admiration often leaves invisible fingerprints, even when collaboration never happens. By the 1990s and 2000s, Costello was recognized as one of the most inventive musicians of his generation. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame would eventually induct him in 2020, cementing his place among the greats. Yet when he spoke of Agnetha in 2025, it became clear that the memory of that missed chance had never fully left him. His success had not erased the quiet ache of what might have been. The final confession. By the 2020s, both Elvis Costello and Agnetha Faltskog had become living legends, each carrying the weight of their own history. ABBA had staged an unexpected resurgence with the ABBA Voyage project in London, where digital avatars of the group performed to sold-out crowds. Agnetha herself had contributed to shaping the avatar image, calling it the greatest legacy of happiness I have ever known. Meanwhile, Elvis continued to tour across Europe and the United States, releasing new work and collaborating with artists half his age, proving that his creative energy remained undimmed. It was against this backdrop that Costello chose to speak. In April 2025, on a live television program, he finally revealed the story he had carried in silence since 1985. The song he had sent, the rejection that came, and the lasting impression it left on him. His words cut through decades of myth. For the first time, fans heard him describe Agnetha not as a distant star, but as a fragile human being, overwhelmed by the cost of fame. The impact was immediate. Fans and media outlets erupted with speculation. Was this simply a bittersweet anecdote, or was it something more, a late confession of unspoken feelings? Costello added fuel to the fire only weeks later, when he appeared at the third anniversary of ABBA Voyage in May 2025. Performing alongside Benny Andersson and Annie Fried Lyngstad, he openly praised Agnetha, posting afterward, "An unforgettable night, and Agnetha, even as just an avatar on stage, still exuded an incredible, mysterious aura. Observers noted that his admiration was not new, but that the honesty of his 2025 confession reframed everything. What once seemed like casual compliments now appeared as fragments of a deeper, unspoken story. Music critics pointed out that his greatest works, from Imperial Bedroom to Blood and Chocolate, bore traces of that lingering disappointment and fascination. The BBC even remarked that both Costello and Fältskog were artists who turned pain and secrets into unforgettable music. For fans, the revelation was more than gossip. It was a reminder that behind every legend lies vulnerability, that even icons of pop and rock carry scars the public rarely sees. Elvis Costello's revelation did more than stir headlines. It forced the world to look at Agnetha Faltskog in a new light. Behind the voice that defined ABBA and the sharp wit that built Costello's career were two human beings marked by longing, loss, and choices that shaped their destinies. What might have happened if Agnetha had accepted his offer back in 1985? We will never know. But what remains is the haunting truth that even legends carry regrets. And sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones left untold for decades. Now it's your turn. Do you think Agnetha was right to reject Costello's proposal, or was it a missed opportunity for music history? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed uncovering the hidden truths behind these icons, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and stay tuned for more untold stories from the world of music.